to her sewing room, although for years before that had been the boys' nanny's room. She was one of a small staff of household help that the Hemingways kept employed here. Now, while the nanny got the smallest bedroom in the house, she also got an Italian marble fireplace, and she got the original bathroom. For over 80 years, it had been the only bathroom in the house. Tip gave it an ingenious design. At a time when most residents on this island had outhouses in their backyards, the Tip family had all the modern fixtures in there. Tiff designed the whole roof to collect rainwater and funnel it into a small cistern over the bathroom. You'll notice the heavy beams in the ceiling. We have Pauline to thank for those stylish French Art Deco tiles. Also, these are the original floors. This is all hard white pine from Georgia, courtesy of Ace and Tiff's brother, Nelson. Nelson Tiff went down to Georgia and founded a town there called Tifton. But now we're going to go on into Patrick and Greg's home.
I don't understand, she said.
Here. I just want to know where the air conditioning unit is that we follow you from up here.
Throughout the house, we're using Pauline's curio cabinets and display cases, and we've got some works of art Hemingway brought back from his many trips to Africa. Hemingway liked a lot of sports, and his favorite was fishing. He grew up fishing the waters of Illinois and Michigan. But when he came to the Keys, he discovered something more challenging, like that 900-pound marlin he was standing next to in the top photo in the corner. Over the years, he became so good at catching those, he could land one in under an hour. Now, we have some photos from the time Hemingway spent in Italy during World War I. He was an ambulance driver for the American Red Cross, and he was only 18 years old at the time. He'd been stationed in Italy for just a few weeks, when one night, he was out delivering supplies to the troops when he was caught in a trench mortar attack, and one exploded about 3 feet away from him, knocking him cold. He woke up in a hospital bed in Milan, and his legs were covered with bandages. The mortar had blown 227 pieces of shrapnel into his legs, and he nearly lost them. His doctors were able to remove most of the shrapnel, but what they couldn't get gave Hemingway problems the rest of his life, and afterwards, he did most of his writing while standing up. While he was spending about 6 months recovering, he fell in love with one of his nurses, an American lady named Agnes von Kurowski. He had every intention of marrying Nurse Agnes, but she was already engaged to someone else. She eventually broke the relationship off with Hemingway and broke his heart. About 10 years later, his brief romance with Nurse Agnes became the basis of the story called A Farewell to Arms. Now we're going to go around the corner to Ernest and Pauline's room. Pauline had her favorite French crystal chandelier installed in this room. And when they later turned part of this room into a second bathroom, she put one in that as well. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, Key West was one of the poorest towns in the country, and it was almost impossible to find a king-size bed here, so the Hemingways had to find another arrangement. They found 2 twin beds and had a handyman fasten the legs together. They found they had board on one of their vacations to Spain. The Hemingways were touring a 16th century monastery when Pauline fell in love with their garden gate. She bought the gate and had it shipped home and turned it into a headboard. You will still find the hinges and latch on it. There's another Spanish antique at the foot of the bed, and it's a birthing stool. Hemingway collected. Back in the 1930s, there were no Bass Pro shops, so we used these as fishing and travel stools. They're partially collapsible, and the large handles came in very handy to carry them around by. He was also an art collector, and he liked abstract and primitive art. The colorful ceramic cat in the corner is a replica of an acquisition Hemingway made while he was living in Paris in the 1920s. He became acquainted with Pablo Picasso, and he traded them a case of hand grenades for the original. Well, now we've been around the inside of the house, we're going out onto the balcony. There's a lot more to see outside, and after the tour, you're welcome to come back in if you like.
Whoa.
This is the largest piece of residential property on the island. It covers almost 1 square acre. The building across from us was a small barn with a little loft overhead that used time. But one of Pauline's first projects was to have the hayloft converted into a writing studio for Ernest. Later, the rest of the barn became guest housing. Because he was bipolar, Hemingway was plagued by insomnia, so he'd start his day every morning at first light. He'd come out here onto the balcony, then walk over to his studio by way of an iron catwalk that used to run like a bridge between these buildings, about where the bamboo is now. He developed a habit of writing 700 words or until lunch. After lunch, he'd walk to his boat and spend the afternoon fishing. He'd come back in around sundown, but after dinner, he'd be off to one of his favorite bars. He'd spend the rest of the evening knocking back a few, but he'd also listen to all the stories around him. He'd sometimes pick up ideas for his own stories that way. Or he'd take a walk around the balcony. I hate having being recorded. The Kiwis Lighthouse was built back in 1847. For years, that was the highest and brightest point on the island. When Hemingway was walking home from a night at the bars, he sometimes used that to help guide his way back. Now in the Keys, there's an old term called conch engineering, and it's applied to creative or screwball construction. It's a good description of the bathroom that Hemingway's built. They put an important part in what we like to call the room with the view. Sometimes when Hemingway was sitting there, if any of his friends came walking by, he'd yell and wave down to them. Now I mentioned earlier that Tim had been a naval architect. During the American Civil War, he designed ironclad ships. The fountain looks like one of his ships heading out to sea. So back in his time, the sea was a little closer than it is now. Over the years since then, this island has been built up by over twice its natural size by dredging and landfill.
Your face is
Okay, so before we take you downstairs, well, we have to judge.
You're walking in